Picture this. Buenos Aires, December 1st, 2001. You're a computer scientist. You've spent 20 years building a career, saving carefully, doing everything right. You have $77,000 in your bank account. Not pesos, dollars. You specifically chose dollar-denominated savings because you'd watched Argentina's inflation crises before, and you knew better than to trust the peso. You are by any measure prepared. This morning you turn on the news and hear two words that will define your generation. El Corralito. The government has frozen every bank account in the country. You can withdraw 250 pesos per week, the equivalent of $250 and not a cent more. Your dollar savings, locked, untouchable. The government has put your money in a playpen and thrown away the key. You wait. You assume this will be resolved. Governments don't just steal savings from people who followed the rules. Then the new president announces the pacificación. Every dollar account in the country will be forcibly converted to pesos at 1.4 pesos per dollar, not the market rate, a government rate. The market immediately moves to 4 pesos per dollar. By the time you can access your money, your $77,000 has become the purchasing power equivalent of roughly $25,000. You lost $52,000, not from a bad investment, not from a market crash. The government converted your savings at a rate it chose, while the real exchange rate was something else entirely. 20 years later, that computer scientist was interviewed about what happened. He said it plainly. Of the $77,000 I had in the bank, I lost $40,000 in the Corralito. That December was terrible. There were riots everywhere. He had done everything right. He had dollar savings. He had planned ahead. It didn't matter. And here's what makes Argentina the most important financial survival case study most people have never seriously examined. It happened in a sophisticated, educated, middle-class country, not a failed state, not a war zone. A country that in 1913 had a GDP per capita comparable to Germany's. A country the IMF was calling a model economy just years before the freeze. I went through the forensics, the documented testimonies, the academic studies, the economic autopsies. What Argentina taught us about which assets survive when institutions betray you is not what most people expect. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what worked, what failed, and crucially, what the warning signs looked like before anyone was paying attention. Let's start with the autopsy. Here is what the Argentine collapse looked like from the inside. Not from the outside, where it looks like a sudden crisis, but from inside, where it was something far more disturbing. A slow-motion disaster that the people who mattered could see coming and chose not to warn you about. Argentina in the 1990s was, by every official measure, a success story. The government had pegged the peso to the US dollar at a 1-to-1 exchange rate. 1 peso, $1, guaranteed by law. Inflation, which had hit 5,000% annually in 1989, was brought under control. Foreign investment poured in. The IMF called Argentina a model for the developing world. Underneath, the government was spending more than it collected and borrowing the difference from international markets. The strong peso made Argentine exports expensive and uncompetitive. The economy quietly entered recession in 1998 and never came back out. By 2001, unemployment was above 20%. 40,000 companies had shut their doors. Now here is the part that should make you pause. In mid-2001, 6 months before the Corralito, it was already clear to bank executives that Argentina's banking system was headed for collapse. Documented evidence shows that high-ranking officials quietly contacted their largest corporate clients and tipped them off. Those clients, large companies and wealthy individuals, immediately moved their deposits offshore, out of Argentina, out of reach. Meanwhile, those same banks continued recommending that their middle-class customers deposit more. Keep your money with us, it's safe. While the exit door was closing, the banks were still selling tickets to people who didn't know there was a fire. By the time ordinary Argentines understood what was happening, $15 billion, roughly 20% of all deposits, had already left the system. The exit came first, and it was orderly, and it was invisible, and it was only available to people with the right connections. On December 1st, 2001, Economy Minister Domingo Cavallo announced the Corralito. All bank accounts frozen. Withdrawals limited to 250 pesos per week. Dollar accounts? Untouchable. The people who'd been tipped off were already gone. The people who trusted the system were now inside it, with the door locked behind them. 5 presidents in 12 days, then the pacification, all dollar deposits forcibly converted to pesos at 1.4 pesos per dollar, while the market moved to 4. By October 2002, anyone still waiting to access their savings had lost 50% of their dollar value. Many spent years in legal battles to recover even partial amounts. Most didn't. Now let's talk about who survived. Because this is where Argentina becomes genuinely different from every other case study. By May 2002, 6 million Argentines were participating in a parallel economy with no banks, no pesos, and no government oversight. It processed an estimated $400 million worth of goods and services annually. It had its own currency, its own exchanges, its own price discovery mechanisms. At its peak, it represented 7 to 10% of the entire Argentine population. This wasn't chaos, it was organization, and it worked. When the formal monetary system collapsed and ATMs emptied, economic activity in Argentina didn't stop. It reorganized around the red de Trueque, the barter network, one of the largest documented alternative economies in modern history. The origins go back to May 1st, 1995, in a garage in Bernal, a suburb south of Buenos Aires. 3 neighbors, Horacio Covas, Carlos de Sanso, and Ruben Rivera, started a small experiment. Neighbors would meet once a week to exchange goods they'd produced themselves. Garden vegetables, handicrafts, homemade food, no money, no banks. They created a local currency called the Crédito, a printed note representing the value of your labor. You brought something of value. You received créditos. You spent créditos on what others brought. Nobody predicted what happened next. By early 2001, before the Corralito even hit, 500,000 Argentines were already bartering regularly, and up to 1 million occasionally. The New York Times covered a single May Day Trueque fair in Buenos Aires that drew 10,000 people in one weekend. This wasn't fringe. This was mainstream adaptation already underway before the crisis peaked. Then December 2001 arrived. Banks froze, ATMs emptied, and millions of Argentines who couldn't access their money climbed into the Trueque lifeboats. 5,000 barter nodes spread across the country, 60% of them in and around Buenos Aires. 6 million people trading food, clothing, repair services, medical consultations, dental work, legal advice, carpentry, plumbing and electrical work. Marcela Rica, a resident interviewed by the BBC, described it like this. You'd offer whatever you had. You might repair a washing machine and get 6 eggs for it. Or do somebody's accounts and they'd fix your car. The skills that held value were the ones with immediate tangible utility. Things people needed that day, regardless of what the peso was doing. Ana Lopez, a psychologist who had lost her job, her husband's factory and her savings, went to her local Trueque club and offered professional services. Within 6 months she had 5 regular patients and was coordinating a new barter node. Her skills could not be frozen. They could not be converted by government decree. Now the forensic breakdown, not theory. Documented outcomes from a real middle-class collapse in a modern economy. Skills with immediate practical value were the foundation of survival. In a system where créditos replaced pesos, only what people actually needed commanded exchange value. The psychologist, the plumber, the dentist, the woman who made empanadas, all maintained income entirely independent of the banking system. Their value lived inside them. No institution could touch it. Physical dollars held outside the banking system was the single most important practical lesson from Argentina. The Corralito froze bank accounts. It could not reach under mattresses or inside walls. Argentines with physical dollar bills outside the system maintained full purchasing power through the entire crisis. As the exchange rate moved from 1 peso per dollar to 4, someone holding 10,000 physical dollars found their local purchasing power quadrupled. This is why, 2 decades later, when rumors of a new Corralito circulate, Argentines still immediately withdraw cash and take it home. The institutional memory of 2001 is burned into the national psyche. Community networks were the asset nobody planned for. The Trueque worked because relationships existed before the crisis. The communities that organized fastest had pre-existing social infrastructure. Surveys suggest around 1/3 of Buenos Aires' population participated in neighborhood assemblies during the crisis. Your social network is not a soft asset. In Argentina, It was the difference between eating and not eating. What went to zero? Peso-denominated bank savings, converted at a government rate while the real exchange rate was something else entirely. And government bonds. Argentina defaulted on $81.3 billion in sovereign debt on December 31, 2001, the largest default in history at that time. Bondholders spent years in legal battles to recover cents on the dollar. The people who lent money to the Argentine state in good faith were told to wait in line. The brutal arithmetic. A middle-class Argentine with $77,000 in a bank account walked away with roughly $25,000 in real purchasing power. A middle-class Argentine who had kept 20,000 physical dollars outside the bank, built practical skills and cultivated community relationships, walked away intact. Here's what keeps me up at night. And it's not about Argentina. Argentina at the beginning of the 20th century was among the wealthiest nations in the world. Buenos Aires was called the Paris of South America. In 1913, Argentina's GDP per capita was comparable to Germany's. It had educated professionals, a massive middle class, fertile land and significant resources. And yet in 1989, inflation hit 5,000%. In 2001, the government seized its citizens' savings, not in some poorly governed backwater, in a sophisticated, educated middle-class society that had every reason to believe its institutions were trustworthy. The mechanism that produced the Corralito is not uniquely Argentine. A government borrows beyond its capacity to repay. The currency peg becomes unsustainable. Capital flight begins quietly among those with access to information. The government freezes accounts. Conversion and devaluation destroy middle-class savings, while the connected have already exited. Take Turkey. Between 2020 and 2022, President Erdogan fired 3 central bank governors and replaced them with loyalists who cut interest rates even as inflation surged. By any orthodox standard, the move was financially illiterate, but it was politically convenient. Inflation hit 36% by the end of 2021. The lira lost 44% of its value that year alone. By mid-2022, annual inflation had reached 78.6%. Food prices doubled. Transport costs rose over 100%. The central bank's net foreign exchange reserves went negative. Not low, negative. The bank was borrowing reserves from domestic institutions just to report a positive number on paper. The Turks, who understood what they were looking at, moved into physical dollars, euros, and gold. Stores began pricing goods in US dollars. By the time most people felt the full impact, the informed exit had already happened. Lebanon. For years before 2019, Lebanese banks were offering 10 to 15% interest on dollar accounts. That is not a sign of a healthy system. It is a sign of a system bribing people to stay inside it. That should have been a visible red flag. It wasn't read as one by most people. When the crisis broke, the Lebanese pound collapsed from 1,500 to the dollar to 90,000 by 2023. A 98% loss in purchasing power in 4 years. Depositors with dollar accounts found them converted to pounds at the official rate, then watched the official rate become meaningless. Those with physical dollars outside the system came through. Those inside it did not. The data is always there. Most people aren't looking at the right data. Go back to that computer scientist. $77,000. 20 years of careful saving. Dollar-denominated specifically because he'd learned from Argentina's past. By every reasonable standard he had prepared. And on December 1st, 2001, none of it was enough. Because every single dollar he owned was inside a system that could be frozen with one phone call from a government minister. The Argentine Protocol is the answer to that specific vulnerability. Not prepper fantasy, not paranoia. 5 things, documented, that actually worked. First, build skills that cannot be frozen. Identify 1 or 2 practical skills that produce immediate value, independent of financial infrastructure. Food preservation, basic medical knowledge, a physical trade, something people will exchange value for regardless of what the currency is doing. Ana Lopez didn't stop being a psychologist when the crisis hit. She made her skill portable. The government could freeze her account. It couldn't freeze what she knew. That is the distinction between the people who got through and the people who didn't. Second, keep physical cash in a stable foreign currency outside the banking system. The number in your account is not money. It's a claim on money, mediated by an institution that can freeze it, convert it, or deny access to it at a rate it chooses, not the market rate. The computer scientist had dollar savings. It wasn't enough because every dollar was inside the system. The people who kept physical dollars outside it maintained full purchasing power through the entire crisis. Start small. Build consistently. Store it physically in more than one location. Third, build your community network before you need it. The Trueque worked because the relationships existed before December 2001. It had been operating since 1995. Every neighbor you know, every local organization you're part of, every trusted relationship you build now is social capital that functions as financial capital when institutions fail. You cannot build this after the crisis begins. The computer scientist had savings. What he didn't have, what saved Ana Lopez, was a network that didn't depend on the banking system to function. Fourth, develop some food production capacity. You don't need a farm. The community gardens that fed Buenos Aires neighborhoods during the crisis grew in urban lots and suburban backyards. Even small-scale food production provides direct security independent of supply chains, and in the Trueque, homegrown food commanded consistent, reliable exchange value throughout. Fifth, understand what you actually own. Every asset that requires institutional validation to access, bank accounts, government bonds, pension funds denominated in local currency, carries Corralito risk, not necessarily high risk, but real, documented risk. A genuinely resilient position includes assets that need no functioning institution to reach: physical cash, physical metals, land, skills. The computer scientist had $77,000. If even $20,000 had been physical cash outside the bank, he would have had full access on December 2nd. If he had skills the Trueque valued, he would have had income. If he had community relationships, he would have had a network. He would have lost money, but he wouldn't have lost everything simultaneously. That's not a radical idea. That's what the forensic evidence from Argentina actually shows. The Argentine middle class was not naive. They were following the rules. They saved in the formal system. They kept their money in the bank. They bought government bonds. They did exactly what responsible, law-abiding citizens were supposed to do. And they got pacificado. Ana Lopez survived because she had something the government couldn't reach: the knowledge inside her head and the trust of her community built before the crisis made those things necessary. The question isn't whether you'll be affected by financial instability at some point. History answers that. The only question is whether you'll have positioned yourself before the sign appears on the ATM. Subscribe if this forensic breakdown gave you a new lens. This channel examines what actually happened, the documented evidence, the real outcomes, so you can read the situation before it reaches you. Drop a helicopter emoji in the comments if you're already building the protocol. Tell me what you want me to dig into next. I read every single one. And remember what Ana Lopez said: bartering isn't just an economic exchange system. It's a way of organizing civil society when political leaders fail you. Build it before you need it.